bring it down and there we go. Okay, welcome. My name's Addie and I use pronouns like she and her, and I am the youth leader here. And I love all these people that are spotlighted on screen. I have different relationships with all of them, but college has been part of our conversations. So I asked them to come and speak to you as a community to make sure you have support and you have different voices that aren't just telling you to turn in your homework and get your college applications in, because we know that that's something that you're already getting other places. And so we specifically want to offer a space to talk about what is it like to go to college or graduate or send your kids to college or be in college during a pandemic. We're in the middle of this. If you looked at the announcements, it said something about post-COVID, which was, I think, bad language on my part, that we're in the middle of it. They maybe went to college after COVID started, but we recognize that we're still in the middle of this beast and we don't know how it's going to end up. And so let's recognize that. And let's start this confusing prayer with confusing conversation and time with a confusing prayer, I guess. I'm going to use this prayer. I'll be reading from it a couple different times tonight. But I want to start us off in Silicon Valley by reminding you that you're not your productivity and you're not your grades, and you're not really actually the college that you got into too. So we are going to be talking from a college-bound perspective tonight, but we recognize that we're created to be creative, beautiful, complex, and non-productive sometimes beings. I just tried this stress-free tea that's like a yogi tea, and the quote on it said, "If you let yourself be successful, you shall be successful." I couldn't disagree more. I just think we're set up sometimes in this culture to think that we can just achieve things if we work harder. We can just achieve success if we're more productive. And I really think let's not start that conversation right now. Let's recognize that we have a lot of benefits and resources that have gotten us to college, that's not everybody's story, and that it's a generational thing that we're benefiting from. And so we thank God for the resources that we have, but we also recognize that this isn't everybody's story. Ooh, so let me begin with a little prayer against efficiency. What? I believe it. Sometimes we need it. I'll end the night with this prayer, but let me start with part of it. Oh God, beyond time, beyond the number line, the hourglass, beyond moons that wax and wane, and waves that push and pull along our fragile ground. Oh God, beyond days and weeks and months, God, uncontained by our 24 hours, free our borders, and yet still within them. So let us enter into this conversation knowing that efficiency is not the goal, that messiness is a part of the process, and that we give thanks for the things we have. Amen. This is so cute. I would love to introduce these people to you. And so I will. I think I will introduce folks, then we'll have a little panelist share. So I asked people to share a little bit about themselves for 2 minutes, basically restate the bio that I am going to tell in their own words and expand upon it. Elsa, if you want to take 4 minutes on behalf of parenthood, you're welcome to do that. And then we will move into a time of discussion. I have some questions, but also if you want to submit questions as, so you could be coming as a student, you could be coming as a parent, you could be coming as one of our adult volunteers, all are welcome to submit questions. And we'll spend the rest of the time in a Q&A with this group. So let me introduce the group. I think I'll do, should I do, I'll introduce one person, then they talk, or should I introduce the whole group and then the whole group talks? What are we feeling? Jenna, You raised your hand, so tell me what you want, and I'm going to
I
do what you
meant
said.
I meant one at a time. I think you should do it where you introduce it and then they talk. I think that's more clear.
That's what I'm going to do. So Julia, you're up first. I will introduce Julia, and then Julia, if you want to take 2 minutes to talk a little bit. And folks, if you have questions as people are talking, please put them in the chat. You don't need to wait, and I will gather those. So Julia is a former member of my youth group in Chicago. Right now, she's a first-year student at Agnes Scott College, Presbyterian related school, if anyone's interested. She's enjoying living and learning alongside other folks whose genders are marginalized. And if you don't know, Agnes Scott is a former women's college, Julia, or current women's college? What's the language around that?
The language around that is historically women's college. We often call it a women's college. Yeah.
Love it. Julia is a happy gap year student who's found that weaving the arts into her academic schedule and engaging with the community beyond her campus allow her to keep one foot in the world in which everyone who is not a college student is living. So I asked Julia to come and speak to the idea that maybe you don't go to college right away. Maybe you spend time in the community for a year or some other time, and that is really valuable. And I can say that Julia grew up in a similar academic setting than a lot of folks here in Silicon Valley, very rigorous, went to a really big, important magnet school that someone named Michelle Obama also went to. And so the idea of not going directly to college, I think might have been something new for some people in your community, Julia. So take it away, my friend.
Thank you for that introduction. I don't think I have to say a whole lot more. But yeah, so I'm 20 years old and I'm a first year student. And that is something I was like worried about. I was like, am I going to be like, is it going to be like weird that I'm older than everybody? But it really isn't at all. And I'll be 21 my sophomore year, and that might be fun. We'll see. I also sing and dance at school, so that's something I'm really glad I can do like as part of my academic schedule. I'm also organizing on and off campus to lobby members of Congress. So I like live at school, but I also work at school, and I also like organize here. I'm still exploring majors, going to a liberal arts school. People are very supportive of me being undecided. I know that it might not last forever, but I'm just embracing that for now. Because like academic disciplines in college are very different from the academic topics that are taught in high school. So I know what I'm interested in, but I don't necessarily know how that translates in academia. So that's kind of what I'm exploring right now. I'm also learning that college is not all about academics. It's also about learning how to manage your own life without your parents having as much direct interference every day. And yeah, for my gap year, if anybody's curious, I want to mention that I did City Year, which is an AmeriCorps volunteer program. So I had a lot of structure. I was working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week in a classroom and helping out with tutoring and event planning and things like that with public school students. So I felt like it was a very purposeful thing to do during the pandemic, and it helped me save some money for college rather than paying for virtual learning. So it was really good timing. And I do think that like the pandemic really pushed me to try to do something differently from what I had planned. So I'm happy to talk more about that if anyone has questions. But I think I'm good to pass it on.
Amazing. And I don't know if you mentioned this, but you deferred, I'm going to spotlight myself right now. You applied and then deferred a year, right, Julia?
Yeah, so I got into the school. And then when I got into City Year in the spring, like it was like very close to the deadline to defer. I let them know I wanted to do something. And they like held my scholarship and everything. So I'm just a traditional first year student now. I just like, I'm a little older and more independent, I guess, than some of the other students coming in, but it hasn't changed my academic pathway once I got to college.
Cool. So keep your questions for deferral, for years of service, for going to a historically women's college, for doing organizing while you're in college. Keep those in your mind and we can ask that to Julia. I'm now going to invite Nick to go next. Nick graduated from Cupertino virtually in 2020 and is currently a sophomore at University of Southern California after doing his entire freshman year of college online. He studies theater with an emphasis in acting, as well as philosophy, politics, and law, and plays on both the indoor and beach volleyball club teams. Nick was there for my one and only caravan so far in person. I just love your vibe, Nick, and I'm so glad that that you can add to this conversation as a big presence in our church growing up. How are you? Who are you?
Thank you. That was building me up there. But yes, everyone, I'm Nick. You've probably seen me around sometime, maybe not in the past couple of years, but before. I went into my senior year of high school in 2020, starting in 2019, I should say, second semester in 2020 with very high hopes, only to have it kind of shut down right after my birthday. Which is on Tuesday, by the way. I'm 19 years old. But it was a really interesting experience to kind of go through the stop of actually having kind of the adults that I grew up around and kind of have structured my whole life absolutely not know what to do, and kind of watch them scramble around and really just come up to answers with questions that they didn't know. And so I've really never been to a graduation. Yes, that's true, Elsbeth. Thank you for that. It was a good song. But it was super interesting to go through that whole process, and then of course receive the news that I would start college online and kind of fight that battle, and then postpone, and then finally get to move out to USC, and then have all these interesting restrictions. So it's been a really interesting journey, especially in terms of me finding out what I wanted to study, because I came into USC kind of not really knowing what I wanted to do. And much like Julia mentioned, studying in high school is completely different from studying in college, especially when it comes to the topics of study. So I was I was not undeclared, but I knew I didn't want to study what I came in for, which was philosophy, politics, and economics. And I can justify that because there was a lot of economics. I don't like econ. The first two are the same, but I realized about halfway through my first semester of studying online that I was so tired of kind of wasting time studying things that I didn't want to do. And so I decided to add theater because I like being on stage. And of course, adults in my life were like, "Oh, that's cool. You're going to be unemployed." And I was like, "Absolutely, but I'd rather do that and have fun than be employed at a 9-to-5 that I hate working at." So it's been a really interesting journey for me. I am here at USC finally, and LA actually is lifting the mask mandate indoors for tomorrow. So it will be my first day of class at USC without masks. So this is a really interesting time.
Wow.
But thanks for having me, and I hope I can shed some light on any questions you might have.
Ooh, I love. I just want to take a moment to add, for the adults in the room, just a little support for folks doing things that they love in college as opposed to things that are hireable. As a millennial, I will say that I was sold a message about this thing called the economy, and then it failed me, my friends. And so I just want to affirm what Nick is saying, that it's really, really positive and helpful to encourage the young people in your life to do things that they love to do rather than things that you view as employable, because we live in a wild time, my friends, and we do not know how jobs are going to be in a while. And so I affirm you, Nick. Thank you. I'm going to go over to possibly rolling her eyes, Olivia, for another employable job. Please, Olivia, I would like to introduce you and say that soon you'll be seeing Olivia all over your Netflix queues. Olivia is a first-year animation student currently attending Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, Georgia. Olivia participated in College Advantage at West Valley Community College during their senior year of high school and gained a full year of college credit. They grew up going to SVPC, but they are not necessarily religious. So I love to bring Olivia into these conversations because so much of what you do when you get to college is look for community. And I see Olivia as someone who is deeply connected to community, who is a beautiful leader in youth group for years. And really, I think that's what we're looking for in college. We're looking for an education, but we're also looking for community. And so I wanted to ask Olivia to speak about how do you get to school and build a family? How do you make friends? How do you maintain connection with folks? Because that's a big part of what happens and what you are all of a sudden required to do when you are sent off to college. I also want to add that, Olivia, you do a lot of work around advocating for folks, and I've noticed that you're doing that a lot around SCAD's policies with COVID. So if you want to speak a little bit to that, because sometimes our institutions don't align with protection of all people. And so I know that some COVID protocols have been really helpful and liberating, but when you move to different parts of the country, that's not necessarily the case. And because we have students calling in from even the East Coast, that's something we might be able to speak to. So Olivia, welcome.
Okay, hello. You touched on a lot of things. So is there like one thing that you want me to start with?
No, go for it. Who are you?
Okay, well, hi, I'm Olivia. I'm attending SCAD currently. I'm an animation student with a focus in storytelling and concept development, and I'm minoring in dramatic writing for TV and film, which is a mouthful. That's kind of how the majors go around here. Yeah, I applied to college in late 2020, so I was a graduating class of 2021, which meant my entire senior year of high school was online. And I had kind of a weird semi-graduation thing. And yeah, so here at SCAD, they just lifted like the mask mandate like last Tuesday. Weird vibes. Because like I know it's lifting all over the country currently, but it's like all of my teachers have stopped wearing masks, and it's I've noticed that some of the people in my class who I've talked to who have like disabilities aren't really showing up to class as much anymore, and that's upsetting for that to be happening. But yeah, I'm going to art school, which is not a thing that a lot of my peers did. I got a lot of pushback from it from like extended family. My parents have always been pretty supportive of me like going to art school. They never went like, oh, you're gonna be like unemployable kind of thing. But like when I would tell my extended family, they would just kind of go, why would you do that? You're going to, go to college and get a degree that won't do anything. But so that's difficult-ish to deal with, especially when you go home. That's a lot of what the conversation revolves around when you go home for the holidays is like, oh, how's art school? When it's difficult. It's a hard degree to get, but yeah. So that's about what I have to say.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna go to Elsa, and then Jenna's gonna bring us home. So Elsa, thank you for being here. Elsa is a beloved longtime member of SVPC. She's a mom to Jonathan, who is a second year at UCSB. Santa Barbara. I'm still learning the colleges in California.
No worries.
And to Lizzie, who's a first year at University of Hawaii, Manoa. Yes? Okay. Elsa has a perspective of being an immigrant, first generation college grad, a daughter of a mechanic, father, and a seamstress mother. Paul, who is Elsa's husband, and Elsa, with family and SVPC community, helped to nurture both of their kids from toddlers to young adults at SVPC. And so thank you, Elsa, for bringing the parent perspective. And I don't know if we said the years, okay, we did, but 2 students during the pandemic. How, Elsa, how?
And I just want to apologize. Paul is with his mom on the East Coast. She is was in hospice care, so he flew out today, and he sadly is not joining us tonight. But I think we share same comments. He really wanted to share a perspective of a dad to two very different kids. We have two very different kids. So yes, Jonathan was a senior with some of you in 2020, where things got interrupted, and then Lizzie was a graduate in 2021. Both went to two different schools, two different children, two different needs. Jonathan went to the Homestead High School, and Lizzie went to the King's Academy, which was a interesting conversation we had about her going there, but really was the best fit for her due to her ability to have other things than academics, like drama and music and dance, and so that provided her kind of a balance of who she was or who she is. Anywho, when our children were growing up, we always nurtured them to know that God was preparing them to do something in the world. And we just kept honing that message in various ways throughout their education, and that he, will guide. We've got to learn to how to trust and guide, let him guide the process, the ebbs and flows and ups and downs and pandemic and all of that. And we provided them a safe home. We didn't do you got to do your homework. They both put a lot of pressure on themselves. So a lot of the kids that are growing up in this area, I really feel already put the pressure on themselves. And so what we provided at home was take a breather, go outside and go be with friends, creating some balance during the pandemic, and then created safe opportunities for them to connect with friends during the pandemic, like knowing which friendships that they were going to create some safe spaces with. And we can talk more about that. And then our conversations around college was not everybody has the same path. So college is an option, but it's not always the same path. And they have two different parents who had two different paths. Paul had a more traditional, you're going to go to a 4 or 5 year institution. Actually, he went to a 5-year institution that had a co-op opportunity. And I took a multi-year work through college because I was a first-gen student through college. So they had two perspectives of their own parents to kind of rely on, and also extended family who did not take that traditional path. So, we've got mechanics and we've got all different people doing different jobs. So it's just honing the message that God has a place for everybody and trusting that, and that we will be changing. I changed my major several times and really found my vocation in teaching through a meandering way, and you're going to meander and know that it's okay to meander, given that that you have knowing that you maybe have a home that's going to say it's okay. Just knowing that you're still beloved, you're going to be fine through this process, and just trusting that and taking it one day at a time, one class at a time, and one day at a time.
Thanks, Elsa. Okay, our final introduction is for the beloved Jenna. Jenna is a former SVPC Youth program member. Jenna graduated from a 4-year undergraduate program in the US during the pandemic with an online graduation. She then attended graduate school in the UK because she felt that US programs did not suit her needs and interests. This entire experience and her graduation while occurring abroad also took place online due to COVID. And so here we go, a hireable, successful adult who made it through this whole thing. Jenna, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll kind of just spit it all out, huh? My undergraduate education took place at University of Portland in Portland, Oregon. I studied elementary education. I have a bachelor's degree in elementary ed with a special education endorsement. I'm also a licensed teacher in both elementary and special ed. I did the four-year, like super full-time, intricate kind of program. I then went to graduate school in the UK. I attended Queen's University Belfast in Northern Ireland. I did go there in person, even though my classes and stuff were online. I wanted to go in person, so I did. And then I missed that graduation because COVID, and also living there when you're not a student waiting for graduation is pricey. I'm also, so that degree was a degree in science and autism spectrum disorders. I had my master's in that, and I am also a published research author, actually, in the field of neuroscience and autism. So much fun stuff, and I'm only just turning 24, exciting. What I will tell you, though, is that despite all of this hireable success, if I could have like one word of wisdom for all the parents and family members, I come from a family of engineers, like both my immediate family and my extended family, and they heard education and they were supportive, don't get me wrong, but it says something when you're in like your junior year, so like 3 years in, and your family can tell people about your sister's specific brand or like area of civil engineering, and they don't even know what subject you're teaching. So please learn, it means a lot. To briefly cover the topic of why I went to the UK is because I ended up hating my university. Not the program, love the program, hated the university. I became extremely disillusioned with the way that a lot of schools in the US handle like the health centers, mental health of students. I was a big mental health advocate. I was a part of like the leadership team for a big mental health organization. And I just was so tired of dealing that both personally, like trying to deal with the school system, dealing with a lot of the misogyny that was happening behind the doors and all of the discrimination against POC as well. And eventually, when I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go for postgrad, I was just kind of fed up and I needed a change. And I think sometimes you enter into situations and you decide like, this isn't for me. I can't deal with this. And you know, it's a whole other bag of challenging to figure out things like, how am I going to take my meds when I move overseas? Is this illegal? You know, things like that. So it's a whole other journey to decide to take where you're at and move it to somewhere else, especially another country. But it ended up being a better fit for me. And it, you know, if it doesn't work, sometimes you just got to pack your bags and go somewhere else to see if it works there better. So I think that's kind of it for my introduction. But if you have any questions for me about any of that, woo, do I have the stories for you? So yeah.
Yes. You do not have to have your plan by the end of the Zoom call. You don't even have to have it once you graduate from college. We are free beings to make decisions based on the ways we've interacted with the world. So I love hearing from Jenna about pivoting and advocating for self too. Jenna and I have become friends because of our care for mental health and also our personal experiences with it. And so I am grateful to see someone who advocates for themselves and says like, I'm not going to stick to this pattern. I'm going to go do something else. That can be a really empowering skill to have and an empowering thing to do for yourself. We're going to enter into questions. I'm going to throw one at Nick right away, and then I have questions for the rest of the group. So we have a question from one of our adult volunteers for you, Nick. How did you find connections into the USC and LA community before you moved there? And how was it after you moved there?
Yeah, so that was really difficult, especially my first semester of freshman year, because everything was kind of piling up in terms of workload in classes and the fact that it was online just kind of doubled the strain of everything. And so I honestly did not really connect with anyone my first semester, other than just kind of superficial, like, hey, we're in the same class, cool, and then never talk outside of class. Second semester was a lot better. I decided not to join any clubs my freshman year because I just didn't want to put the effort into a bunch of Zoom meetings. That was a contentious decision amongst my family, but it worked out well. What kind of saved me was that I don't know how much experience all of you have with Zoom classes. So let me paint a picture. You have a lecture of 70 people, and the only person whose camera on is the professor, and everyone is dead silent, and it feels like nobody's alive, and then you log off. And that is your human interaction for the day. And so that was actually me in one of my physics lectures. We had about 75 people, and it was the professor with his camera on and me with my camera on and nobody else. So kind of hard to make friends. But the saving grace was my theater class, which was about 10 people. And of course, you have to have your camera on because it's theater. And so we would all talk and interact as humans. And so I made some friends in that class who in turn introduced me to more friends, and then when I actually got here, they have huge club fairs, like gatherings, like whether it's within your classes or your professors or even just your residence hall. Like there's a ton of different ways to get involved with everyone. And I think even more so because of the pandemic, they kind of upped the number of opportunities we have. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's been my kind of experience.
And when you were you were staying at home for the first year?
Yeah.
Were you still in contact with other friends who had gone to college but were staying at home? Was that an option, or were you just kind of like, I'm all alone?
It depended on the day.
Yeah.
I lost contact with a lot of people just because it was kind of like it became clear who I was like actually friends with and who was actually friends with me, and who I was friends with because I saw them by necessity every day. And so I maintained kind of like this close, small circle of friends, which I mean, even that was hard to maintain because of how limited like contact was and exposure. But definitely like first semester and even lots of second semester, like my closest friends were ones that I'd gone to high school with and weren't necessarily at USC or in the LA community.
Which I think is, I want to take space to say, I think a lot of people's experience is going to college and realizing who your real friends from high school were. And also just to take like, let's all breathe in and breathe out the lament that you didn't get to join in clubs and you were the only person with your camera on with 70 people. And that there's a lot of trauma that's gone on in this little, in these Zoom squares that we don't understand. I went to college, but that wasn't my college experience. And so adults who are here who have different experiences of college, I think remember to, instead of saying, yeah, I get that, I have that experience, listen to the people who are in college right now and be prepared to change your impressions of what college is like, because we who have already gone to college, not in this situation, don't know how this feels. And if have nice enough people to say, let me paint you a picture of what a Zoom class is like, we can be grateful for that. But I think sometimes we dismiss people's experience by saying that we know what they're going through. So a lament, I offer a lament right now, and also an affirmation that you all are doing a good job. Thank you. I'm gonna open questions to the group. Nick, stay as long as you can, and then peace out with love. I'm gonna offer this to everybody. How did the pandemic shift your values around college and around college degrees? Does that make sense? And
I
would
like to say a little about that.
Yeah.
If I can. Sorry to step twice. But that was like going to school online was kind of like the last straw for me in terms of, you know, like I mentioned in my introduction, like what do I want to study? And I think without the pandemic, I probably would have stuck with something I didn't like. But because I was kind of stuck and having no fun, not really making connections, I was like, I wanted to do something for me. I was like, I'm not going to throw away kind of this last chance I have to get educated in a field that I want to. And it, you know, I wasn't going to kind of waste that opportunity. And that was because, you know, the pandemic was cutting off everything else. I felt like my only outlet was to choose what I wanted to study. And I think if there hadn't been a pandemic, I very well would have graduated with a degree that I didn't want in a subject that bored me, frankly.
Yes. So I again say to the people listening, listen to that wisdom. It takes years for people to find out that they went to school for the wrong thing. It takes years for people to realize that they're not happy in the things that they're doing. And so this is an opportunity, I think, to listen to younger people who I would think, I will say, are being prophetic in our midst and saying like, no, I don't accept the way that this makes me feel. I yearn for something better, and I'm gonna move towards that. Others, how did the pandemic shift your values around college and college degrees?
I'll say that I guess I thought it was anticlimactic both times. Maybe it's because I never got a real graduation for either one of those. And I went to a very, very small, graduated with 13 other people, high school. And I didn't get a real graduation for that either, not the ones everyone else seemed to get, not the ones, my friends talked about or any of that. I never got that. And so I think for me, it was very anticlimactic every single time. It was like, oh, I'm graduating right now. I'm in my PJs eating donuts in my living room, like that. This isn't how it was supposed to go, but it's how it ended up going. But when it comes to degrees, though, I don't think my values around that changed. I slaved away and cried and lay on the floor and was absolutely miserable for 4 years to get that bachelor's degree. And after I realized it was just a piece of paper and that it was all my hard work, and that was kind of the difference. The second one, I think, was fine because, again, I was like, I did all of this work and they just gave me a piece of paper and that was supposed to be it. But that also may be the fact that I didn't get a real graduation for either, and that sucks.
So I want to bring this up too, that rituals are so important to humans, like how we develop and how we understand community, and graduation in this culture and the society is a really big part of ritual that we understand. And so that's just another opportunity for noticing differences that I know, Olivia, you didn't go to your graduation on purpose, but you actually came over to my house and then you said it was graduation, which I cannot believe. And so we can always opt out of rituals, but that being taken from people is another thing to lament. And I don't know, Elsa, if you have anything to say about that, because rituals are just as important to parents, but just want to name that we had to create new rituals in the coming years, and we have to, maybe Olivia, if you have better ideas of something other than graduation, or Jenna, something getting more than just a piece of paper. We currently have a ritual that means a lot to people, and missing out on that has cost people a lot.
I think this is Elspeth. Rituals are really important. They're also very local and culturally. So some of them are, like in Holland, we never had this big thing as whatever all goes on with a graduation. And so some of the cultural things are very local and evolving. Our parents probably didn't do the same thing as we did. So when we think it's a big deal, it might be, but it might not be. So Olivia chose not to attend, and some others don't want to attend for whatever reasons, and others feel that they're missing out. So I think it's good to take stock of that and say, this is my favorite donut. I'm going to celebrate for myself. This is the biggest thing I will remember. And the paper is just a paper. And maybe then the next time you realize you're not doing it for other people, you're doing it for yourself. and you make your own personal celebration. If I have a bad day, I do something fun for myself. If I have a good day, I do something good for myself, and that's my ritual.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think that the tone is, it's relevant. And it's not always the same, and it's not always been like that, and it's not always like that everywhere else. Like, I'm sure Elsa had a different high school graduation than her kids, and the same for me.
Yeah, I think Elspeth, you're bringing up resilience, that like we can miss out on a ritual and we can still love the donut. And I think we can lament that it meant something to us and it didn't happen. So I think both of those have happened with this group of people.
Yep.
Anyone else want to add to that?
I think, Jenna, for year 2, you will see your classmates now that have had a very different experience when they did their undergrad in the UK. So you're mingling now with people that have a very broad perspective, which is also interesting.
The solution is to go to Northern Ireland. I think that's what I'd say. Okay, we have a question from a student who I know is currently trying to figure out between 2 colleges. And so the question for the entire panel is, what made you choose the college you did choose, especially if you decided that during COVID? Money. Money is legit. I'm about to pay off my student loans from grad school, so go for it. Yeah, Olivia, what were you gonna say?
I mean, I was in a pretty nice situation where I basically got in everywhere I applied. And it came down to like, I was in the same situation where I was like stuck between 2 schools, the one that I'm currently attending and one that I at the time wanted to go to more. And it came down to kind of how much of a scholarship they wanted to give me, and also the second school that I didn't end up going to was essentially just telling me, they're like, oh, we think you'd do better in this program, so we put you on the wait list for the other one. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. But yeah, financial aid, you're allowed to ask for more. That's something that is not talked about enough. If your school, the school that you want to go to, is like, here's your financial aid package, and you're like, oh, this is not enough, you can send them back an email and be like, hey bestie, I really want to go to this to your school, but feasibly I don't think I can with the amount that you're giving me. And more often than not, they will hit you back with, okay, here's an offer that we have reconsidered, here's more financial aid. That's something that my art teacher told me, because like she knew that a bunch of people, well, at least some of the people in my class were going to be applying to art schools, and art schools are notoriously like disgustingly expensive. And so she's like, you are allowed to shop around, you are allowed to ask for more, and you are allowed to say no to offers that, even though they seem like, you know, crazy good. Just like look at the big picture of like I got a scholarship that was like $19,000 a year, which is like, I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And then I looked at the tuition and it was like a little teeny tiny fraction, and I was like, oh, never mind. So yeah, honestly, biggest deciding factor was scholarships. And then the second deciding factor was like, I was getting a vibe from the second school that was like, they didn't really think that I should have been going into animation, and they would rather be pushing me into film. So that's why I chose SCAD.
And you originally wanted to go to that other school more. How do you feel about that now?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't think I would have been terribly happy in northern New York. It's cold and dark there a lot. So Savannah weather is more agreeable with me. So I'm feeling pretty okay about my decision.
Okay, we love it. Any other? Yeah, Jenna.
What was the question? Sorry. Can you repeat it?
The question is, what made you choose the college you chose, especially if you decided during COVID? And this is from a student who's currently deciding between 2 schools.
Oh, because I was going to say, if you're deciding between 2 schools, I did this in undergrad, sleepover. at both of them. Do a sleepover at both of them, and that will tell you exactly which one to do. And ask to stay with somebody in the major that you want to study. You can ask them all sorts of questions, and they will find you someone, and you'll stay in the dorms. In their dorm, they will bring you to the food places on campus, and you can attend classes with them. That will tell you. Ingenious.
Yeah, agree.
I wanted to share, so I had two different children. So Jonathan was accepted to several schools. He had committed to a East Coast school during pandemic, and I think it was Penn, back east. And then he received an offer letter for UC Santa Barbara. And I could tell from the expression on his face when he got that acceptance letter that he was going to UC Santa Barbara, even though he did not go and visit that school during pandemic. So he made that decision based on proximity and program. So is primarily around proximity, and he's not ocean loving child. So he basically did it for program. And then Lizzie also had several schools, different schools, and but she chose her school for place and program, but she's since changed her program. So, but she felt that, and they both know I'm talking about them. But she felt that she needed to feel at home where she was. And where she is, she's feeling at home and feels like she's in a community that sees her. So two different decisions for both kids. And giving her the flexibility to change. She changed her major after the first semester to broaden her learning. So she was kind of in a nursing program, but then she wanted to broaden it to explore other health fields. So just to give you that perspective of the two kids. And the transitions were very different. Okay, so Jonathan was home for a quarter. So half his year was in his room. We were watching him. We were kind of like on depression watch, like, because we knew he was really down about being at home. Like it wasn't a launch. And he didn't have that graduation, which was a milestone thing. He felt really kind of like, I'm not sure if this is supposed to happen like this, right? And just recently he was able to articulate that he really missed having a graduation. It's taken him a year and a half to articulate that he really missed that milestone. So that was different, although he did enjoy the online prom.
Didn't even know that was a thing.
He went to online prom because he could be in his room in his pajamas.
Yeah, that's funny.
So anyway, just kind of giving you that. And then when he did go to school, it was 2 quarters in his dorm room by himself. It wasn't a dorm room. He actually they moved them into apartments, 2 students in an apartment, but you had to stay in your own room and do online learning. He was happy to move, but he was, again, we were checking in with him pretty regularly because he wasn't feeling connected with anyone at school.
Which is something that I think we should always be doing with college students, but and students in general. But yeah, let's stay attentive to that, folks.
Yeah, and I want to speak to that too. So give kids 24/7 access to you. They have 24/7 access to us do regular check-ins. We have family Zoom time, and allowing them to just express themselves in that space. And we do visit them often. So that's another thing that we feel really privileged and are grateful for. We visit them as often as we are able, and to celebrate milestones like their birthdays, and when we're able to.
Thanks, Elsa. Julia, you want to add anything?
Yeah. I think the pandemic really, had a huge impact on what I chose to do. As far as like taking the gap year and kind of holding out, because I felt like I worked so hard in high school for this promise of like a certain college experience. And I figured if I can hold out a year while everyone gets themselves together, I can do that. And so I did. But I did a lot of my college search before the pandemic, so I can't really speak to like actively applying to college in the pandemic. A lot of my friends went through that last year, and it was really challenging for them. But my parents like didn't really understand the point of college tours, to be honest. So like they weren't really taking me anywhere. So I had to take a lot of initiative. And I did get to go visit some schools, like either built it into like trips I was already taking for things, or whatnot. And a few schools had like scholarship like competitions where you went and they like tried to sell you on the school while you could go enter for a scholarship. And so that was like a way to kind of be like, this is an investment in like me getting financial aid. And that's actually how I was able to tour the school I go to now. And a huge thing that informed kind of my choice was like meeting people and talking to them and realizing I liked talking to these people, but also just like the way that they communicated with me. Once the pandemic hit and they had all these like sessions where you could talk to people from the school, and they were really personal in their communications, and made me feel wanted in a way that other schools, like I couldn't even get someone on the phone because it was such a big institution and you're like a number. So that was something that came into play. And then, yeah, I think just shared values are really important, especially with the pandemic, like, and safety. I've been really, really pleased with how my schools handled pandemic safety. Being on campus, like getting to go on campus for this entire year has been really wonderful. And we had 2 weeks virtual at the beginning of the semester. And then we didn't have a huge spread after that. And we are still wearing our masks. We are about to have spring break, so that might change after, because as Olivia shared, mask mandate is off in Georgia, but they've been really caring about that. So like, if that's something that's important to you, that a school takes that seriously, I guess like that's a thing to consider now. And I feel like I don't have to worry about the pandemic so much, because I know that we're all vaccinated, I know that we're all masked, I know that we're all testing, and I just put on my mask and I go about my day, and I don't have to think about COVID all the time. And I think I know from living at home in an intergenerational household, and not always being in an environment like that, that it can be really stressful to constantly have to do your own safety mitigation if you're in a community that's not doing that. So I don't know if that is the decision maker, but I think it really matters now. So I'll end with that.
That's great. I'm going to ask another question for the group. This is a long one. I'm interested in what kind of communities you were looking for when you left high school, or communities you were looking for your kids to integrate with if you're a parent. And I just want to recognize that it is hard to find sacred communities. You could go to a school that is exactly the program you want, exactly the location you want, you love the people there, and they have a terrible chaplaincy, or they have a terrible religious community, or that's like super evangelical and you don't identify with it, or they don't have a ministry that you can see yourself in. So looking for a spiritual community can actually be really like misaligned with the place that you are looking for to study. And that's really hard for students, and the church isn't great at providing resources for young adults. So what were you looking for when you left high school in terms of community? And if spiritual community is a part of that, can you share with the group how you were supported by that? Or if you're like, I looked and I couldn't find anything, I hated it all. That's a real story, and that was my story. I was like, I love my school, I hate the chaplain ministry.
I can jump back in. Well, I am still sentient. I know Olivia and I are a little late here. Just like, and I'm leaving in the morning for a trip. But anyway, I'm so happy to be here. So I go to a Presbyterian school, the Presbyterian chaplain. Not Presbyterian though. But they have like interfaith services. I went to Ash Wednesday at school, which is really nice and accessible. And there are a lot of student groups do a lot of the like spiritual community stuff because it's a tiny school. They're not gonna have a chaplain for everybody. I thought I was gonna join the like witchy group, but it seemed a little like white witchy TM, so I've been staying away from that. There's a lot of witches at my school. But anyway, I kind of thought I was going to church shop a little bit. I grew up engaging with faith and kind of like not having to be married to a denomination or even a religious practice. So I thought I was going to like go to different churches, but I worked for a Quaker organization and I grew up in a Quaker house, not Quaker, but lived there. And so I tried out the Quaker meeting. My academic advisor told me that there was a Quaker meeting walking distance from the campus. And then like, that's just been my community because it's just familiar and comfortable and not too doctrinal. And it's really, I'm really interested in engaging like with the community I'm living in outside of just the people who are there for college, because a lot of people who go to my college aren't from the place we're living, but our college influences the local area. And so that's like my place where I go on Sundays to like to hang out and go to teach the first day school with the kids and talk to like older people and talk to parents and just engage with like people of different generations and have some time for like meditation and hear what's going on in the community, because a lot of people are really involved with stuff. And then I also like have some time set aside in the week to like meditate. When I say meditate, I'm not like good at the clearing the mind thing, but like just take some time to be quiet and think about stuff. That's really helpful for me, especially like trying to remember who I am because I'm far away from home, and like trying to stay grounded in like what I know while I'm encountering new things. And I also have friends who are intentional about creating community. Like I have some friends who like kind of like have set up gatherings that are like about creating community, because even though we're in person, the social stuff is just still not how it was, I guess, before the pandemic. It's just people I think are more hesitant to talk to each other than I would have expected. And so sometimes you have to be that person who goes up and talks to everybody and invites people, and usually they're happy to have that. I would also say that going to campus events, even if they seem corny, is a really helpful place to meet people, because people, the way that people are in class is often very different from how they are outside of class. And so you want to make sure you're interacting with people outside of the academic environment, because everyone has a different relationship to academics. And I really love going to different cultural events and different like events around the holidays, or we like have events for every like Women's History Month, Black History Month, like all of the months. There's always something going on. So I don't know that I've like found best friends at college, but I definitely feel like I have a network of people I'm familiar with, who I know a little bit about and who know a little bit about me. And I've also been volunteering with some local organizations, and like I just went to a potluck with one of them yesterday, and like went to my first potluck in 2 years. And so I like took my partners, my +1. It was just like, so like, this is normal. And so, yeah, there's a lot of different options. I mean, there's faith community on and off campus, there's campus events, there's volunteering and getting to know people that way. And I'm just getting started. So, yeah.
Ooh, I love that last thing. You're into a year of college and you're like, I don't have best friends yet, but I am going to potlucks and I'm just getting started. I think that's a really, really good advice, that you don't go and make your best friend in your whole life the first week of college, and just because that's what relationships are. So we love to see it. How about one more panelist talk about community?
Sure. I guess I'll
Yeah.
add on. So, going into college, I guess I should have mentioned this. I toured none of the places I applied to. My tours were set for spring break 2020, and we all know what happened there. So, I was kind of flying blind as I came into college last September. I knew approximately one person here when I showed up, and the thing that I do to make friends, it's worked pretty much my whole life, is I make one friend and then I make friends with their friends. And so then you kind of build a group off of that. And so that first person that I knew, Addie, you're right, not my best friend. You don't make best friends first week of college. That's just not how it goes. But the friends that I made through that friend, we still talk, we're still hanging out, we're still chilling. There are a lot of churches in Savannah. Never been to any one of them. I'm sure there is something to do with religion here. I would not know. But honestly, the best thing that you can do is talk to people in your classes, especially like the classes that you're like super interested in, because then, strangely enough, you find people that have common interests with you. So I'm taking an art history class this quarter, and I met this like amazing group of people who are also all history nerds, and we go and we hang out at the coffee shop after class and we talk about history, and it's super cool and fun. So yeah, I very much so agree with Julia's sentiment of like, it was a rough start. It's hard to kind of rebuild your social structure immediately, because like, especially like from the background that I came from, I lived in the same house my whole life. I never moved. I grew up in the same community. Everyone knew me since I was like a small child. And so moving here, nobody knew me or my background or anything. And so it was such a surreal experience to try to have to speed run that with every person I met, to try to be a friend where you were just like, you just say things and then you would realize kind of after you said it, like, oh, they don't understand the context to what I'm saying. So that's like a thing that I had to relearn how to do. But and I guess I went in with maybe unreasonable expectations, where it was like, okay, first quarter, I'm gonna build my infrastructure back up. I'm gonna be great. I'm gonna have my support network. It's a work in progress, and that's kind of how you should view it. Yeah.
I would also add, Olivia, because I know that sometimes roommates are a part of college, and that I think, Olivia, you've had the experience of having a great roommate that has a cat, and then also sometimes roommates like actually leave and then they're not your roommate anymore. And that is, I always think roommates are like the best experiment in college. And I tell everybody, you're not going to be best friends with your roommate. You just need to be good roommates with your roommate. So if anyone has any roommate questions, is that, do you have a roommate, Julia?
Addie, you told me that, and I am so close with my roommate. Like, we get along so well. We're going on our class trip together, and we're gonna be roommates there. But I'm really sad because I just got
my roommate from college, but she's not my best friend. Okay, she's having a baby in like a week. We talk, okay, but she's not my best friend.
Yeah. We actually all have double rooms at my school. But I just got an RA position, so I'm gonna be alone next year, which is like a perk. Like I'm supposed to be happy that I get my own room, but we're gonna miss each other.
You're made to be an RA.
But I know lots of people who've had issues with their roommates, and there's processes, so it's okay if it doesn't work out. Like, you're not gonna be the first person who it didn't work out with. They have systems in place to make sure you get what you need.
Which sometimes takes self-advocacy. Yeah.
Can I say something as a parent? So my kids were all in college. The youngest is still in post-grad school. And so they all had different ways to make friends or explore friends, but they it was interesting that they practiced some of that in high school, but they also observed the parents of how they make friends. And they might have made fun of us when we did that, when we moved. But when they went to college, they started using some of those tricks. So just talking to somebody off the street that they don't know, when I was doing that, they said, Mom, you don't know those people. Why do you talk to them? And then in college, they started doing that. And they said, now I know why you did that. It's kind of fun because you learn something about a new person and you never know where it leads to. Like Olivia said, you might like their friends. And so they had different styles and different practices. They did go to some club or fraternity, and they asked me if that was okay or if I thought it was weird. And I said, well, what does it give you? And so it was good to have that open dialogue with some of those. And they're still best friends with some of their Fred students that they met. And the other thing, they looked for crew. They looked for local church. They didn't like them as much, but they at least were aware that they were there in case they wanted them. And when one of them had a sad accident, one of their friends died, and they called and I said, you remember that church, go to the pastor, just talk it over. And that was a good asset. So you never know what you need. Don't burn any bridges. You know what your resources are and use them when it's the right time, or when it's fun to go on an outing, or when it's fun to join a chess club, or when it's fun to join a dance or join crew is what they did. And Carmen was part of Athlete in Actions and like that a lot. So you kind of make friends across the way. It's a journey.
Yeah, and I would say don't be discouraged if you try one thing and you don't fit in. So if I went to crew, I wouldn't fit in. I think those who know my theology know that, but that doesn't mean, I think you can get like, oh crap, and then you think like, well, there's nothing for me here. You can find a spirituality in a pottery group, or in the sitting at the coffee shop and talking to people about history. Or I started this weird prayer group when of all my friends, half the people were atheists. We just went around the room and said what was hard that week, because everybody in college is having a tough time. And so start your own thing if you can't find it. The point is connection, not matching with the first thing that you try.
Exactly. And you're in college, so it's a journey. You don't have to be part of that whole big group, but there might be a subgroup within the group that you feel very connected to, and they're open to your creativity. And I like what Julia said, you just start your own little small group, and then you'll see how that evolves.
Okay, friends, I have a teeny question at the end, but this is the less teeny one. You have learned things during this pandemic as it's ongoing that have helped you thrive. I know you have, and I know that you've had plans that didn't go well because of the things that have happened in the last couple of years. So what have you learned? He's here. What have you learned because of the things that you thrived in, and what have you learned because of the things that didn't go well? And that could be, I got this skill, or it could be, I learned that, like, maybe Nick would say, like, that major wasn't for me and I advocated for myself. What have you learned?
I think skills wise, the biggest thing that I've gotten through this entire pandemic was I taught myself how to be happier on my own. You know, we had to do all this social distancing. And for me, like I spent this whole year abroad. And when I got there, I was like, oh no, oh no. Because in the UK, they're a bit more strict than they are here. No tours were happening, no clubs were meeting, no classes were in session. The only people who I knew were the people who I lived with. And there was nothing that you could do where you could possibly meet new people, even if you went to the pubs, which were closed for a while. And that's what everyone does for fun, is they go to the pub. You're not allowed to talk to anybody at the other tables. Everything is like very roped off. There was no way to meet new people. And I think at first I panicked a little because I was like, well, what am I going to do now? I'm not going to make new friends. I'm not going to make connections. I'm going to be miserable. Was this a mistake? And I realized, no, No, it doesn't have to be. And so on weekends, I started, I bought myself like a little savers card. I started taking the train and I'd do self tours. I looked things up online. I was like, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do this. Like, I think normally I'm very much a people person. I want to be around people. I rely on people to guide me, to make decisions, to go places with me. But over the past couple of years, I've learned how to be very happy doing things on my own, getting lunch by myself, providing myself with compliments. It's like a very high form of self-love. And I think despite the fact that it can be really scary doing things on your own, being in new situations, being in situations where you cannot possibly interact with a lot of new people, where you're very, very limited in what's going on with you in your environment. It was hard at first, but I think I learned how to be very self-sufficient and very happy with being an adult and being independent, and finally getting to a point where I feel more comfortable with the fact that I am getting a full-time job. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And I think that the pandemic taught me that in a really weird way, but it did. And so that is the biggest skill that I've gotten, is that I am a fully functioning adult and I can take care of a bunch of problems on my own because I literally had no one else for a while.
Yeah. That's a huge thing that many people are still trying to learn. Thanks, Jenna.
I'm gonna say that I had legitimately the exact opposite experience, but the same result. I don't enjoy being around large groups of people. I never really have, even pre-pandemic. Like, I was not a people person. I had my group of people that I would hang out with. So it's like a weird thing to say, but at the start of the pandemic, it was great. I did not mind at all. I was enjoying having less time physically in a school building, and I was enjoying, having a bunch of time to myself. But about at the year mark, things started to go south, and I was like, wait a minute. Because introverts, they need to be alone in order to recharge, right? But that does not necessarily mean like, oh, we can be alone forever. And so then I had to learn how to reach out and ask to hang out with people and to spend time with people. And last spring, that was a lot harder. Because we were still mostly unvaccinated, and you had to be a lot more careful with who you saw and what kind of contact you had with people. But so there was that added barrier that was difficult for me, but I had to figure out how to manage it. And so I feel like currently I'm at a pretty good balance of knowing when I need to go talk to people and go touch some grass and go talk with a friend, versus when I'm my social battery is totally drained and I need to go be alone for a while. Also, totally underrated experience in college is if you have an afternoon off, just go walk around your city. You will be living most likely in a place that you have not lived your whole life, whether it be just a city over from where you grew up, or even just a different part of your own city. Walking around the place where your school is a just entirely just enjoyable experience, because you get to see something that you wouldn't otherwise, and it's a nice break from studying or working. And my favorite thing is to read the little plaques everywhere to figure out what things mean. But yeah, so I figured out a good balance of how to be alone and how to be around people as well.
I love this group. Any other skills or plans that you just want to name didn't work out?
I would add that something I learned, I guess, in the pandemic was just to be more aware of what other people might be going through, because we're all going through it, and it has become easier for me to remember that someone might be going through something and not assume assume that everyone's like just cheery because we've experienced this collective trauma. So that's something that I think I've learned, and also just about being intentional about social connection, and about having time to myself as well. I think that's something else that I might have not learned the same way without the pandemic.
That was a conversation we had with our kids, in really being aware that they're going to be around people that may or may not have had the same experience as them, in terms of where they, where they've grown up. And that's just coming from my own, as their mom, like, know that there's going to be students there that are working. Maybe they can't hang out with you as much, or so just knowing, being aware that students coming from different places and different communities and different backgrounds, and be sensitive to their stories. So in getting to know new friends is being a good listener. Listen to, if you're meeting a new friend, be a good listener. And use your commonality, whether it's like Jonathan plays basketball or Lizzie, she's in dance class as her outlet, like creating her own community. But just being aware of the diversity of students that they're encountering. Not everyone's coming from place of where they're not having to they can Grubhub or do DoorDash for a meal, so being sensitive to those kinds of differences, and knowing that they need to be sensitive and have some awareness around the diversity of students they're around and trying to make friends with.
Okay, if you've been around me for a while, this is going to be my final question. And if you need to define this in a witchy way, please do. But I'd love to know from everyone. You can put it in the chat or just voice it. Where do you see God in this experience? And that doesn't mean make it better. This is about toxic positivity. Let's all end on a good note. It could be like, this was really tough and I'm so glad my roommate had a cat. Or it could be, I made it through and I do have that piece of paper and I'm so proud of myself. And it was really, really hard. So this isn't ending on a necessarily good note. It's ending on an honest note that we believe that God shows up through people and through communities. And I have told you that God is present in this. And so, friends, can we end by answering, where do you see God in this experience? And I'm going to invite Elsa to go first.
Well, I definitely see God in places in between the lines, and there are challenges around laundry or the hiccup with the bikes and how they're getting around. So I'm finding God in those moments of their little challenges, and kind of like a little bit of a, oh, God's teasing you there a little bit, making you, creating some humility around your because your credit card didn't work on the washing machine or the dryer, whereas we would commiserate about, we used to have to use quarters and to do laundry and such. So just finding some of the little I don't know, I just find it fun to recognize that God's in those spaces too, of their day, and know that, yeah, it was hard for you to like not have a bike today, or you or and you had to get to class because you had an exam to get to, and it was pouring rain, and so but you persevered through it, so and you persevered through it, and you went in and did your test even though you were soaking wet, and you went back to your room and went back to sleep, so just kind of highlighting that God's in those spaces of their little quirky whatever happens to them in their day, and and so and they've I want to just share that our kids have in recent weeks that they've been able to reflect back about how of their gratitude for creating the space that they needed to figure out, but being alongside with them. So, as a parent and just kind of talking to the parents here that are online, we don't need to be their counselor. We just need to be the place where they can just blah, and be good listeners for them and not have to figure it out for them. They just want to be listened to and heard, and loved. And that's like primary, no matter what, that they're loved.
Okay, I'm going to make you all go. So Jenna, Julia, Olivia, what do you think? It can be one sentence if you want to write it in the chat.
Oh, I wrote out extensive notes on all the questions. Help me manage my stress about being on a panel. It was great. I meditated on it.
Okay.
Yeah. A few samples from that. I think from both my relationship with myself and also from connecting to people, letting them know I care about them, but then also getting feedback from people that they appreciate being connected with me is something that I've just been really appreciative of lately. I also think in people finding ways to do things differently, or doing new things or letting go of things. I know it's something I'm trying to practice more. And then also I think a few people kind of hinted at this, but that college is this incredible privilege that we're told to aspire to, and it's the best thing you could possibly be doing, and you're supposed to be happy. But most people are having a really hard time, and holding that tension of the thing that we've sacrificed for and that we aspire to is not necessarily any it comes with its own sets of problems. Hopefully is a space to kind of problematize these images of what has to be perfect or complete in life. And so that's something that I've definitely been sitting with, is why are we having such a hard time in such a privileged situation? But I also see God in having a place that I feel I can belong for the next 4 years. And I know that not everyone goes to school and loves it. Definitely folks have transferred from my school into my school, but I'm appreciating that kind of sense of having that kind of figured out, since there's been so much uncertainty in the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just say, just kind of in the great gamble of the whatever AI was used to sort out roommates, I kind of won the jackpot. I'm pretty happy with my roommates, and by pretty happy I mean extremely happy. Also pro tip, don't become besties with your roommates before you meet them. I know a lot of people who did that, and then guess what happened 5th or 6th week of the quarter? Because there's a certain type of boundary that you need to set with someone that you're living with, and you can't set those comfortably if you are friends already. It's maybe it's an anxiety thing or maybe not, but it's you don't want to upset a friend. It's easier when it's a roommate to set that boundary. But my roommates and I, we're friends. We spend a lot of time together. We talk a lot. And there's a cat involved, so the cat's super cool and chill. So yeah.
Jenna?
Yeah, I guess, where do I see God in this? I guess growing. That's the most that I think I can kind of come up with. It's just this like really awful, terrible, uncomfortable, but ripe age to do a lot of growing, because you're finally, according to our like societal like and legal systems, as soon as you turn 18, it's like overnight you're suddenly an adult and so much changes for you, and then you're kind of thrust into this system where we kind of seem to prioritize going to college over not going to college, and then what kind of college you have to go to. It's like it's a tough situation to be in high school. It's a tough situation to be in college, and it's a tough situation to come out of and be like, I just did this. And this is how I felt. This is how it went for me. This was hard. Some of this was probably harder than it should have been, but I didn't know at the time how to set those boundaries, how to say, this isn't what's working for me anymore. Like there's so much there already. And then you just toss COVID in on top of it, and it just complicates the whole thing. There's more stress, there's more anxiety. But again, it's this, unfortunately, this time where you start to learn a whole lot about yourself, because suddenly there's so many more expectations. And it's like they happen overnight, and it's tough. And so I'd say probably, you cross your fingers, you hope, you pray, you get through a few years of it, and hopefully it's maybe a little bit better. But I think the way that I see God in all of my pain and suffering over the years is that at the very least, I've grown into somebody I am very proud of in a way that I wasn't when I was like 16 years old. And so, especially with the pandemic.
Ooh, I feel compelled to tell you one of my favorite James Baldwin quotes. You think your pain and suffering are unprecedented in all the world, but then you read. And so I know you're all doing a lot of reading in college, and I know you're doing a lot of growing. And I think my friend James really hit it on the head that one of the things that and my friend Jenna, one of the things that reminds us that we are loved is knowing that our pain and suffering is actually relatable, whether we learn that from reading or from a well-placed roommate or a great professor, or a parent who nurtured us into our educational experience. So I'm going to end again by praying against deficiency, because we did it. We made it to this place. We're so proud of, I'm proud of you all and the voices that you have and the things that you have done and are doing in terms of your field and the way that you are becoming better people and loving the skills that you're learning. And also we yearn for a time to rest where we can not be productive and not have to-do lists. And so I wish that for you. I'm grateful that you put this on your to-do list, my dears. And I'm going to end us in a prayer against efficiency. So I put the link to it in the chat, but here's a little bit of it for the rest of us to leave with. God beyond time, we come to you pulled by the bullet points in our calendars, by the titles we keep beside our names, by the goals we've charted and the accomplishments we list to define our value. You see each image we upload to our pocket screens, altered, filtered, and pinned to virtual walls. You, God, touch our distortions and soothe the edges of our efficiency, and only you can make us real. God beyond the boxes we build to contain our lives, the hours we tracked and tally, God outside of time, yet here, come to us, relieve our ragged breaths, slow our steps, relax the red lines that spike in our brains. Tell us what is true, show us how time rolls like calm water, let us cup it quietly in our hands. And let's say a thank you and an amen. Vincent was very present. And we give thanks. Amen. Go to sleep. East Coasters, thank you, thank you. And if you watch the recording of this, welcome. Thanks,
Thank you.
friends. Good night.